Doctor Khumalo has dropped a bombshell. You know, the mother of all bombshells, because usually with legends and people who have worked for the club or work for the club, we don't hear this, but we usually hear this from people who have left the club and don't care about their affiliation with Kaizer Chiefs. But Dr. Khumalo is very much still affiliated with Kaizer Chiefs. And he had an interview with Robert Marawa and he said some things, and he did not say some things. He implied some of the things, but from what he said, it made me go, wow. Hello and welcome to Khosi Nation Fan TV. I am Pelo, I am your host, and this is where fans meet and talk about Kaizer Chiefs. Khosi Football Club. So, we know how we've been talking about how these Kaizer Chiefs legends should be brought back and should be asked for their input and stuff like that. Well, guess what? That's the exact same sentiment that Dr. Khumalo says they share, because he says this: I will always be a Kaizer Chiefs fan and I will always be a Kaizer Chiefs legend, but the doors are not open. So basically how that house or that team is run, it's the people who are here. If you're a legend, if you know anything about our culture, whatever, we will not take your opinion unless we ask for it, unless you are hired. And one will obviously say, Mpilo, come on, this is a business. Obviously, there is a certain way that they are running things, which I also respect. But at the same time, if you look at how wrong things have gone in the past 8 years, in fact, it's been longer than that, but now we're just counting the years where we have no one squad. You look at that and you're like, wouldn't it then make sense to bring back the people who actually watched Chiefs and played for Chiefs when they were doing best, right? But then Dr. Khumalo says, no, the doors are closed. It's like, bam, you're not going to do things. And he says, I don't want to burn my fingers. Which means, Pelamaiti uzoshisa izandla zakhe, he knows ukuthi there is fire there. Kuyashisa. You get involved with that and then you are in a messed up situation. And it's funny enough because I was talking to someone who told me about the situation at Azwan. I think we're talking with Mastermind, and we're talking about this whole thing of who wanted who to stay, who wanted Zwane to stay, but the others wanted Zwane to leave. And even though everyone had agreed on the fact that Zwane was going to be given 3 years, after a year, they all of a sudden changed their minds. And all these things that don't make sense, even the players that are aboard, it's clear that there is a certain way that this thing is done. And if you are not complying, I don't even know if it's complying. If you are not agreeing with what they're saying, basically, you are done and your fingers will be bent. And think about it. Bobby, when we started being too talkative, people like me, but every fan of Kaizer Chiefs, he then reminded us that this is family business. So it really doesn't matter whether you're a club legend or whatnot. What seems to matter the most is the fact that you are family. And there is more. We're going to talk about more later on in the video. Because when they then asked him about Pitso, do you think Pitso will do a good job at Kaizer Chiefs? He says if Pitso can go and be the Kaizer Chiefs coach, he'll probably be the best coach. Ne? He says, but I have my reservations. He doubts it pretty much. And what are his reasons? He says because of the things that are done and the things that are happening that are not supposed to be happening. And then let's stop there before we go to the especially, because he said especially something else. What are things that are happening at Chiefs that are not supposed to be happening? We've talked about this literally every time when we talked about Pitso. The control, as we just said earlier on. You are family, and if you are family, you can be involved in the decision-making process. So it seems. You are a coach, you do what the family tells you. Doesn't matter whether the family has no experience in playing football. What matters is family, because if Bob is going to come out and say, this is family business, I wasn't voted to be here, that means Valley, it's the kind of my way or the highway kind of situation over there. And also, if you're a coach, it's the management's way or the highway, or you are sacked, basically. And it would be sad if that's the reality that coaches, well, we've had, that's the reality, but it would be sad because now we know from a person who is a legend of the club, who we view in highest esteem, that masikhuluma ngo 16V, everyone nje knows ukuthi who that is. But if he himself, if voice yakhe is not respected, then angafika enzeni coach, a person who's just hired as a coach, if a person who's done so much for the club already is not respected or allowed to have an opinion on things that are happening at the club. But he says that things that are happening at the club, and he says especially player acquisitions. And we've talked about this whole thing of who is scouting at Kaizer Chiefs, right? Who's scouting at Kaizer Chiefs? Because one of the things that he brought up with Dr. Khumalo is the fact that William Shongwe also talked to Kaizer Mtaung Senior. Now we're not talking about Junior, we're talking about Senior himself. He said, allow us to bring some of the young players to the club. And they were ignored. Well, I get that, but I also don't get that. One, I get it because, well, they played for Kaizer Chiefs and they would know the quality or the type of players who would fit Kaizer Chiefs. On the other hand, there could be the issue that, oh, you're just going to bring your friends and your friends' kids to come and play for Chiefs. So I get it, business model type of thing. And you want to have things done in a certain way, and you don't just want anyone to have access, which is exactly why you should have specific people who are legends appointed to do things at the club. But that's not the case. By the way, what is the case is that you please do subscribe and like the video. It does help me to reach more people like you. Honk, the good stuff. Just subscribe. Anyways, now when we continue with this whole story, there's also he says he would like to intervene. And in a way, it does sound like, I wouldn't call it a cry for help, but it does. But not a cry for help. Desperate to help. That's what I would say. Not desperate either. Because, I mean, I'm a Kaizer Chiefs fan, and watching my team not winning is painful. As a person who's watched the team win, imagine if you played for the team and you're with them when they were winning and now they're not winning. Imagine how much hurtful that is, right? So he would like to help, but the situation is just so bad that it's not allowing them to be able to intervene, because you touch that, there is fire, you can't do that. And he says this thing, which is kind of a summary of this whole thing. He says there is ego in that thing. Says it ultimately comes down to ego, because he says that sometimes ego and pretense, he says that because they will smile at you when you are there, and then when you leave you find out that, oh, it was just all done in pretense. Funny enough, I am just thinking to myself, how much do they pretend to the fans actually? Because I'm thinking of how Menpi last year, I am not saying this in a bad way, but I remember Menpi last year, he was very critical of Chiefs, of the management. Like, we don't have a coach, And yet I saw Menpi in good background with Kaizer Chiefs management. And there was one that didn't look happy with him, but he just looked away. He wasn't focused on the picture. I wonder if it was like, dead and buried, it's just a fan was angry. Or were they also now using the angle of, he's our fan, he's here to buy things, so we must be happy with him. I'm not saying he's the problem. I'm saying, what if they were pretending, right? Because people are always going to jump and say, no, they gave him custard. I don't think they gave him custard. I don't really believe that. But what I do think is that there might be pretense. And that is why when some people ask me to do some content and interview Kaizer Chiefs management or something like that, I always say, you know what, I would not like to do that, because to me it feels like, which basically means we're just pretending, and would be smiling and say, oh, how is Chiefs gonna do things? And then everyone is smiling and stuff like that, but only to find that they're pretending for you. And that is just sad. That is really sad for me to think that Dr. Khumalo, as much as he's revealed this much, that there is ego and pretense, he still said he doesn't think that was the right platform to reveal all these things, and then he just sort of cut himself and did not continue exposing more things. But the fact that it has gotten to a level where he can say all these things, it just tells you how bad things are. What do you make of Dr. Khumalo's comments? Do you think he went too far with what he said, or did we need to hear this so that we can kind of have the insiders look to what is happening? Because most people are like, you don't know what's happening. But now, Dr. Khumalo just told us what is happening. So what do you think about what he said? Was it a good idea? And what do you think Kaizer Chiefs should do with this? Bring more legends or what? How do you manage this whole thing? Because you can't bring back all the legends either. So what's the best way to manage this? And also, who is regarded as a Kaizer Chiefs legend, right? Because that's also a valid question. Do let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, remember, equals Alpelumoy.